Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our annual webinar on making the most of college tours. A couple of housekeeping notes. We will be recording this webinar and sharing that video, our slide deck, and our guide to college tours in a follow-up email that will go out tomorrow. Please feel free to share any questions you have in the Q&A box. If it is a broad question, we'll try to answer it live. If it is otherwise, we'll follow up one-on-one. Thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy day to join us. And if you're in Austin, hope that you survived and kept safe and warm during last week's weather, and that hopefully you have power back. I'm Allison Randall, Managing Director of College MatchPoint, and I have the pleasure of introducing our amazing team today. Claudia Salinas, prior to joining College MatchPoint, worked in admissions at highly selective colleges like Harvey Mudd, Rochester, Cornell, and Rice. We are so excited to have her here with us today to share her insight and expertise. Julie Ritchie, an educational consultant at College MatchPoint, who has worked extensively with a wide range of students throughout their college planning and application process. So glad to have both of you. This incredible team is here today to help you explore just how to make the most of your campus visits. Since our CEO and founder, Lisa Bain Carlton, founded College MatchPoint 15 years ago, we've worked with students who have been admitted to hundreds of schools, and we've assisted families in making the most of the schools they visited along their college journey. Visiting colleges can be a terrific way to bring the college process to life or to help students test their hypotheses about what is most important to them in the college they attend and discover other things about colleges that are important to them as they visit. Our discussion this afternoon will start with a little bit of context about College List and how that can impact college tour planning. We're going to talk specifically about some tips and guidance for planning campus tours, the tours themselves, and we will talk about demonstrating interest.
Well, wonderful. I always like to get started with a little bit more context about where we have been the last few years. So what we continue to see is that there's definitely a lasting impact from the pandemic. So I want to provide some context to what is happening in the admissions landscape. First, what we saw is that there's definitely an increase in the number of applications from first-year students. In fact, since 2019, we've seen a 24% increase in applications overall. So that's remarkable for so many reasons, given where students are and where they're headed. Interestingly, here in the state of Texas, in this last application cycle alone, we've seen a 67% increase in applications from Texas students. So these are students who are using the Common Application Platform. Just to be clear, the Common Application Platform is the most popular college platform for applying to schools in the United States. So this 67% increase, we have our suspicions. We believe that this is definitely in part due to both the University of Texas Austin and Texas A&M University officially moving and using the Common Application as one of their platforms. So they're contributing to this increase that we are seeing overall. And then finally, the last context point that I want to add here is that we are seeing a larger number of students applying to 10 or more colleges in any given cycle. And that's the largest that we've seen in a really long time. I think it's actually the first time we are seeing students apply at this level to this many different colleges. So what does this really mean? So the impact of all this increased application activity is that some colleges are becoming more competitive. And so that has lots of different impacts on the college process. In addition, we are seeing certain majors become more competitive as well. So we're seeing increase in competition for majors like business, engineering, computer science. So those are definitely areas that we see students needing to have a little bit more background in order to have success in the process. We continue to see increased anxiety and uncertainty in this process. Here at College MatchPoint, we really believe in reducing that stress. Okay, so we often use a 1 to 5 scale, with 5 being the highest, and we try to keep our students at a 3 or lower for this process. So as you are embarking on this journey with your students, you want to think about the ways in which you can help your students keep that level low, because this is a process that they can definitely manage, and that with assistance they can have great success in. Another area that we're seeing have a lot of impact on sort of the list building and how we're thinking about which colleges and universities to apply to is test optional. Certainly before the pandemic, test optional was a growing movement among colleges and universities. And the pandemic almost required most, if not all, institutions to jump on that bandwagon of test optional. Many schools are experimenting with what test optional means for them. So many are doing their own institutional research to see what that really means for their educational environment. The reality is that some schools are returning to test optional, and that is something that we should be aware of, but it is certainly adding complexity to families trying to understand which are the best schools for their students to apply to. And then finally, where we're still seeing some lasting impact is in students having a hard time figuring out what they want to major in. So it's not just a learning loss that these students have experienced, but rather they've had an activity loss. They haven't had the same opportunity to get out there and try things on for themselves, whether it's shadowing or interning or just really taking some extra classes in some areas that were interesting to them. We're seeing that as sort of these lasting effects from the pandemic.
So, we always like to remind students and families that the key to a successful journey is to end up at a college where you will thrive academically, socially, and financially. It is so much more important to focus on what you do at college rather than just where you go. And there's such a huge breadth of options, and that's exactly the idea of creating a wise college list that will translate into many options for you to choose from. So even if you're a student or students on here, even if you have started the process with a dream school, let's say UT or Dartmouth or Stanford, for example, that's great. Have your dream school and bring that same passion and enthusiasm you brought to identifying your dream school to finding others with a similar offering and similar feel of your dream school. And that will help you round out your list. Okay, so for developing an initial list, we believe that the foundation of a wise college list is a student's criteria. Okay, so by criteria, I mean the things that you feel are going to be important for you to thrive in college, like a location. Do you want to be in the city? Do you want to be near a specific activity? Do you want to make sure it has a specific major that you want to do? So think not your parents' criteria, not your school counselor's criteria, not your friends' criteria, but what you think is most important to have in your college experience. So all things like, what kind of educational experience do you want? Do you want small classes where you can talk a lot and ask questions, or large classes where you could sit back and take notes and not have to participate a lot? Do you want a big campus or a small campus? There's so many different criteria to think about. And what we see is that these criteria tend to change and evolve over time. So as your student moves from 9th to 10th to 11th, and even during the fall to spring to even the summer before applying their senior year, these things can change. And that's totally expected because the students are changing and growing during this time, right? And so the more they research colleges and the more they visit and see a college, they get a sense of the kind of school they want to attend. And so one thing we suggest when you're developing your very initial list is that you include a breadth of options. And that means not just acceptance levels, so also size, location, And for some families, cost or relative cost, when you factor in potential merit or need-based aid, is really important. So students, because you are the ones going to college, students should drive their list. In our experience, this is when they have the most ownership of their list development. So students, you guys have such strong opinions when it comes to making your own purchases. I know you've got like a million Google tabs open when you want to, buy a phone or even a new pair of boots, right? So we encourage you to have even more, like way more opinions about what college is to apply to than you do for those other types of purchases. Because, this is going to be like the most expensive purchase or one of them of, your life potentially. And it will lead to 4 years of your life. So it's really critical that you're invested in the process and that you're a savvy consumer. And parents, we really encourage you guys to be open to shifts and changes in your students' thinking. They may start out thinking they want a large public university, but end up deciding that like a small liberal arts college is just the place where they'll be able to thrive. This is why it's important to start out with a very broad initial list to give your student the ability to figure this out, to test out their hypothesis. And most importantly, don't just focus on reach schools in your family discussion of colleges. If you do anything, make sure you're focusing on a variety, the breadth of schools. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about breadth of schools. So what is that? That means a balanced list of schools. So of course, is this not one size fits all, right? This is different for each student, or it may vary by individual students, but generally on average, students who apply to a balanced list of schools end up applying to 2 to 3 reach schools, 5 to 7 possible schools, and 2 to 3 match schools. So you're probably wondering, what do we mean by those categories? Basically, a reach school is any college that has an acceptance rate of less than about 30 to 35%. And this is a lot of schools. A possible is where your students' GPA and scores fall within that school's middle 50% range. And a match is where your students' GPA and scores fall above the middle 50% range. You'll notice we do not use the term safety anymore because this is just a different era. We don't really live in an era of safety schools anymore. And anyway, even those schools that students typically think of as, quote, safety schools, typically they put them on their list only because like a parent has encouraged them to put them on their list, but they have no interest in actually going to those schools. So our approach with students is very simple. Only apply to schools you'd actually want to go to. Don't waste a slot on your list for a school that you would not go to. We want you to be asking not, is this a school I can get into? But rather, is this a school that meets my criteria, and is it a place where I can thrive? Finally, as Claudia mentioned earlier, one trend we've noticed that starting during the pandemic, students who are very focused on highly selective schools, these are students who are highly ranked at their high schools or have extraordinary backgrounds or skills or talents. They are expanding the number of reach schools they're applying to. That's totally fine. But we always caution students to make sure that if you are expanding the number of reach schools you're applying to, it should not come at the cost of those in the possible and match categories. So for example, your list should not consist of 11 reach schools and 1 possible. Why? Because you may not have very many options, maybe even only 1 or none. And January is a really tough time to have 1 college on your list. 1 college acceptance. So we want you to have lots of options. And that's why a balanced list is crucial. All right, Allison, do you want to start us off on how to make the most of campus tours?
Absolutely. One of the things that Julie mentioned was when students are determining what they might want, a lot of it is hypothetical, right? These students haven't gone to college before, and it may be based on what they've heard, what they've read, what their friends are saying, where their parents went. So touring colleges is really give students a chance to try it on, to get there and experience what college feels like and test that hypothesis that they have about what is most important to them. In addition, being on a college campus, in addition to kind of bringing the experience alive for students, really helps them discover maybe things they didn't know about, hadn't thought about, that all of a sudden become really important to them. I had a student I worked with who was an engineering major, and until she started visiting schools, didn't realize exactly what she was looking for in a makerspace. And so once she visited, she realized that, you know what, that equipment, that space is really important to me. And that became her part of her criteria, which she didn't actually know about before. Also, revealing priorities can come up when you're visiting schools. All of a sudden, students really come face to face with what is important to them, what is most important to them. And we always encourage students to think about the schools they're visiting, places they're going to live. So, try the food. You want it to be a place where you want to be. You want it to, have spaces where you feel comfortable. And think about size. One of the things that our founder and CEO, Lisa Bain Carlton, was quoted in the New York Times encouraging families to visit schools as part of being a smart consumer. This is a big decision for the student and the family, and visiting schools really helps educate everyone about the options so that you can figure out what is most important to your student and to your family. And we'll talk about this a little later. Visiting schools also provides the opportunity for some demonstrated interest. That's a coming attraction for a little later in the webinar. So, pro tips as you're considering planning campus tours. One of the things we know is that space can fill up based on number of people visiting, number of tour guides, all of that. So hop on that admissions website and go ahead and register for that official tour. You want to make sure that you're signing up for official tours where you're actually having to put in your information, pick a date, put in your email, and if possible, try to meet up with current students. If you don't know any students that go to a particular school, this is a great opportunity to reach out to your admissions rep and say, hey, I'm going to be on campus on X date. Are there any business students that might be available to talk to me about their experience? And to make the most of that time you're actually spending on the campus, complete a virtual session before you visit. Go online and engage in one of those synchronous live info sessions where you can learn all the basics so that when you're at the school, you can really dive into what is most important to your student.
And I can't emphasize enough the importance of planning early. So tours are limited. Oftentimes when you want to visit spring break, the summer, it's the same time that students may also be away from campus. So there may be a limitation on the number of available tour guides. And you want to make sure that if it's something that you really want to visit and it's important for you to get a good sense, that you try to get on those official tours first. So definitely get to those websites, find out what's going on.
One of the things that is also an impact of the pandemic is that there are lots of virtual experiences available now to explore campuses. These are a wonderful way to explore campuses that maybe you won't get to visit in person, but also to really dive in so you can maximize that in-person visit. For virtual experiences, there are also ones that focus specifically on a major. So it'd be a great way to educate yourself, educate your student. If your student is on the fence about maybe which major, getting to some of these virtual sessions where they talk about the major can also help your student decide. And there are wonderful virtual college fairs In addition, there are college visits to high school campuses that are also usually on the counseling website. These are also great opportunities to educate yourself before you visit. And if possible, meet the rep. Maybe the rep will be there when you're on campus too. So,
Okay, oh, go ahead.
So as you're planning, Julie's going to tell us a little bit about exactly what to consider to maximize that visit.
So a few things I think are really important in planning visits. First of all, students who really take the driver's seat in the college research process end up more empowered because they go on college tours with a clearer sense of what they're looking for in a college. This is sort of what we've found as we worked with students. So look to the students' criteria and have conversations about what is important to them before scheduling visits. With some of the students we work with, they're looking for like lots of academic rigor and a place where the library is the social hub of campus. So they really want to make sure to check out the library and study spaces more than just they would get on the official tour. For other students we work with, for example, a college that offers a great football and tailgating culture is really important. So they want to check out the stadium and the places where the tailgating takes place and talk to students about that. For some students, like the food offerings on campus are really critical, and they want to make sure that there are plenty of options for them. So visiting the dining halls and the other eating options is a priority. For all students, however, we do recommend visiting the building of whatever major it is they're interested in. And so before you visit, we really encourage students to look through the majors you're interested in and delve into what is involved in majoring in that major to make sure you understand what you'd be undertaking and what classes would be required. For example, we had a student who was interested in marketing. And when she started really diving into what was involved in marketing at some of the colleges she was looking at, she was surprised that she had to take many upper level math courses because it was in the business school. So that's something to know ahead of time. And for example, if you're really interested in researching a certain topic, make sure to look up the faculty in that department and see if any are studying the topic you're interested in researching. Depending on the college you go see, you might even be able to schedule a meeting with that professor during your visit, if it's a small college. When planning your initial visits, it can be efficient and helpful to target areas where you could see a variety of colleges. So for example, I was just saying this on the Q&A. In Austin, if you're in Austin, you could see 3 different types of schools just in Austin. You could see St. Edward's, that's a medium-sized school. You could see UT, a very large-sized school. You could see Southwestern or Trinity, a small liberal arts type of school. So this will give you valuable information about what is appealing and not appealing to your student. All right, so how are you going to prep for your visit? Well, obviously, like I just mentioned, you're going to do your research. You're going to visit the website. You're going to jot down some notes and questions you have. We find this is really important for students to take ownership of, but you could also do this as a family if it works better for you guys and you all enjoy doing it together. We have many families who sit at dinner and they'll watch a virtual tour or a virtual information session from a specific major at a college to get a sense, and they do it together, and that's fine too. What is important is to write down the name of your admissions representative assigned to your high school so that you know it when you go visit a school. Because it's possible that at some schools, particularly smaller colleges, maybe even medium-sized schools, you might be able to meet with your admissions rep on campus. They might even ask to meet with you when you're in there. So don't be surprised by this. Instead, be prepared. This is where, if you've done your research, you won't be shocked and you'll be, less nervous. And if you have some questions ready, this will come in handy. You could just put them in the notes section of your phone and be able to refer to them if you want while you're talking to the admissions rep. Of course, remember, if you do get to talk to your admissions rep during a visit, you must write a follow-up note, handwritten or emailed. It's really important that after any sort of discussion, you do that. So we often get asked this question. Many of you already, of course, know how to schedule a campus tour, but many people, this is their first time doing it. So here's how you schedule an official campus tour. You go to a school's website. Here is UT, for example. you click on the admissions page. Then they will always have a little tab at the top or on the side that says visit. Click on visit, and then find the visit opportunities that align with your intended dates. At some colleges, when you click on the date, you'll see that you may and you start putting in your information, you might also be able to request to sit in on a class or visit with a professor or a coach or visit a specific department. If that's not an option when you register online, you can always call ahead to the admissions office to see if any of those things are possible. So it's important to be proactive here and be a good consumer. All right, so a great campus tour is when, a lot of things, but if you can visit when students are in session, and it's great if you can. We know many people can't. A lot of times you have to visit during the summer or during a break, and that's totally fine. But in a perfect world, you'd at least see some of the colleges on your list when a school is in session, because that way you'll be able to see what the students are like and what the classes are like with the students in them. So that's really important. And remember, we love campus tours, but they are a marketing tool. And the tour guide does not represent every single student at the college. So try to talk to other current students if you can. Eat in the cafeteria, maybe chat up the student in line to ask how their experience is. If that makes you cringe, at least take the time to eat in the cafeteria and listen to what other students are talking about and kind of observe what they're doing. Like, are they eating? Is everyone eating alone with their earbuds in their ears? Or are groups of students talking? What are they talking about? This is you're looking for a good match for you, remember? So be a good consumer here. And we always remind families that it can be such a mistake to just go on the tour and then leave. It makes so much more sense, while you've taken all this time and energy and money to get to this campus, to take some time to really wander around the campus and the surrounding area. Take some time to just drive around the area. Consider the transportation options available, or what's available. How do you get around? How do you get to Target or whatever store you care about? What restaurants are around, for example? How far is the nearest major city? Where would you have to fly to get to the school? How many flights would you have to take? How would you get from the airport to the school? Like, all these things would be important to know about if you chose to go to this school. We know that tours, on tours, it's important to be efficient. We totally get that. However, we do caution families not to do more than 2 college visits in a day. If you tour 3 in a day, they just all blur together. It's also a stressful experience, and it doesn't allow you enough time on each school. This is a time when you guys get to be together with your kids who are going to be gone to college soon. So we want you to have really fun memories and have a fun time together. I remember with my 2 boys going, and we have such fond memories of some of the schools we liked and some of the schools we did not like. It's a great time to have a fun experience together. So make sure to give yourself the space and time to have that fun. Don't get your itinerary so packed that you don't have any time for exploration. Okay, so a few other places you might want to consider visiting other than just, the typical spots on the tour. If your student has a learning difference or other disability, you'll want to visit the Disability Services Office. Sometimes it's called the Accessibility Services Office. Notice if it's like at a really far corner of campus, or it's like in a dark, dank basement of, a building at a far side of the campus. That kind of gives you a sense of how important that is to the school. If your student might be using mental health services, it's important to stop there and see what that's like. The Career Center is a great place to visit. I always recommend people stop at the Career Center. Ask if they have, what kind of programming they have starting freshman year. A lot of colleges are, starting more programming freshman year, and that's really important. So see if they do that, or just ask what kind of assistance is available. And of course, pick up brochures wherever you go to help you remember what you've learned. We had a student, we worked with a student who had a specific international program, like study abroad program, he already knew he wanted to do. So for example, he stopped by the International Programs Office and was able to ask at each school if that school would give him credit for doing that program. So that was helpful information for him. And, often you'll get a coupon from the bookstore when you go to admissions. So that's always a fun stop on your way out of the campus. Okay, so sometimes a student will say to me after a trip to, 5 or 6 schools, oh, I don't remember if that was at that school or that school, and I can't remember. So don't be that student. You need to document your feedback so that you remember, you've spent all this time and money to go on this trip. Make sure you discuss how you're going to document your feedback of each school. And students, this should be led by you because you're the ones going to college. So take notes either in the notes app on your phone, have a notebook. We actually have this tour evaluation scorecard, and we're going to include it on our follow-up email. So you could print that out for all the different schools you're going to and fill that out if that's helpful. I also highly recommend taking lots of pictures as you're on campus. And pro tip, when you get to a college, take a picture of the school sign. And that way, all the pictures on your phone after that will be of that school, so you won't get confused. Okay, and one final note, don't think it's been a waste of time if your student hated a school you go to. Just think of it as getting valuable information and an opportunity to tweak your students' college criteria accordingly so you can identify colleges that are a better fit. All right, that's the campus tour. Now Claudia is going to give us the down and dirty scoop on demonstrated interest.
Thanks, Julie. So definitely demonstrated interest is something that you may have heard of as folks are starting to talk a little bit more about college admissions. So what is demonstrated interest? Demonstrated interest is basically how a student is saying, I'm interested in this school. It's very straightforward. And so there are lots of ways in which students can engage in that demonstrated interest exercise, and we're going to dive in a little bit deeper into that. So first, I always like to start off with some context. So there's more data that's coming out, both reported by our National Association of College Admissions Counseling and other parties, that's stating and showing that demonstrated interest as a factor for admissions is becoming increasingly important, okay? So that's one thing to keep in mind. And this becomes important because many students are failing to show that they're interested in. And this can impact your admission results. So this is why we want to spend a little bit more time on what demonstrated interest is. So on the college side, they are very interested in sort of landing the right class. I think one thing that students and families often forget is that colleges and universities are a business. They need to make sure they have enough students on campus. Too many students, if they miss that number, whatever the magical number is for that campus, it can mean that there's not enough housing. So we've seen examples of where colleges and universities literally rent out the hotel next door to house students. Or your classes might be really big if they can accommodate you for housing. On the other end of it, there might be too few students, and then that means that they don't meet their budget minimums because by and large, many of them are nonprofits, and that means courses or people can be cut from the institution. But how does this connect to you? I think that is an important question and why you should be considering it. If you are a student who is on the bubble, okay, and you are showing by the bubble, let me define that a little bit more. Oftentimes in admissions conversations, what we find is that students are on the cusp of being admitted or waitlisted at a particular institution. And so when we start seeing students who are demonstrating interest and showing interest in the college or university, that can increase that student's likelihood of being admitted against a similar standing student. Okay, so you want that bubble to work for you and not pop right from under you, right? So those are some things that I think are important to this discussion and for why demonstrated interest is an important piece. So that definitely makes a difference. Now, here are some things to kind of also keep in mind. So after all these, I spent close to 20 years on the highly selective side of admissions. And I can tell you that admissions is closely mimicking business in many ways. And definitely one of the ways in which they are doing this is they have various systems that are managing their customers, right? You, the student, and the family. And so this is one sample of one system called Slate. And Slate is a really powerful tool that a lot of colleges and universities use. This is a way in which they are tracking your interest. So they're tracking how they're sending you emails, if you're responding to emails. And so this becomes important as your engagement increases. And what we mean by engagement are things like campus visits and tours that you're probably planning at this minute because we've already suggested you should start early. So definitely they'll send you an email saying, hey, come visit us. This would be great. And they're going to start tracking how you are responding to those kinds of initiatives. Like, does that mean that you then are prompted to sign up for a visit? Do you at least go and visit the website? So all of those become touch points in this process. This is another example of how they're tracking your interest. So this is another system called Workday. And one of the things that is tough for a lot of colleges and universities to figure out is how interested are you, the student, in them? And so those touch points become a collection of evidence for those colleges and universities to understand how interested they are, that you are in them. And so the way this plays into admissions is that they're trying to attract as many students as they can that will be good candidates for their school. But not all of those good candidates will be interested in their school. After all, as we discussed before, there's close to like 3,000, over 3,000 degree granting institutions in the US. You're probably going to be interested in more than one school. And so we really want to make sure that whatever schools it is that you're interested in, that you're having those touch points, because those schools are definitely trying to entice you in different ways. So sort of a blown up shot of this, and it's a little blurry because I wasn't able to get a better picture, is that they are trying to forecast what your probability of success on campus will be, how strong of a student you are. And they take all these different variables to try to calculate the likelihood of you actually attending their campus if you are accepted. So that's something that is why it's important for you to be engaged with demonstrated interest, to have those touch points. So what does this mean a little bit more in detail? Okay, it is a two-way street when it comes to demonstrated interest. A school's trying to engage with you and you are trying to engage with them. And you're definitely having a back and forth conversation about what is happening within this relationship that you're developing. Sometimes a school learns a lot of great things about you and that you are a good fit for them in many ways, including their institutional priorities. So institutional priorities may be things that the school is saying, this is super important to us. A good place to find out more about their institutional priorities is to visit their mission and value statements on the school's website. On the flip side, you're learning a lot about the school and you're trying to understand if this is a great fit for you. So both of you are engaging in this dialogue. And so each of you are trying to test who's interested in who. They're sending you more information, you're reading it and asking more questions. So it becomes a really interesting dialogue that is having an impact on your admission standing. So how can you demonstrate interest? So definitely there are a lot of ways in which you can engage with the college or university. You can email your rep, you can join the virtual sessions, which we have already talked about how important that is, but you need to make sure that whatever you're doing, you are able to actually share your information and for them to know that you are interested. So a lot of times they'll ask for your information, like, who are you? Give me your email address. And that's how they're starting to collect whether or not they know you. But other touch points can be that some schools offer interviews. Some of them will give you a chance to visit some classes on campus. Others will have you follow them on social media, which is becoming increasingly important because we know that that's how students communicate is through social media. So it's okay to follow the colleges that you're interested in on their websites, on their Twitter accounts. A lot of them have YouTube channels. So those are all wonderful ways. And the final way in which you can demonstrate interest is if you apply early. Okay. Now, an important note about all of this is that not all schools are practicing demonstrated interest. So demonstrated interest is definitely something that I would say highly selective schools are using, but maybe not the super duper uber selective schools. So your Ivies are likely not schools that are using this system, but certainly they may even be interested in how to use their marketing dollars towards students. So they're collecting your information in some ways. So I generally advise students to err on the side of caution and demonstrate that interest rather than taking the risk of whether or not a school doesn't use it. So that's kind of the easy way to kind of think about that. Okay.
Claudia, quick question.
Uh-huh.
Does a student need to do, often my students will say, how much is enough? Is visiting enough, or do I have to visit and email and check my portal and all these things? What would you say to a student who asked that?
I think it depends. So that's like the famous answer in admissions, is that
Right.
admissions officers like to say it depends, and it truly depends on the institution. So for example, if you are a Texas student applying to a school in New York, visiting might be harder. And so they're going to take into account what you could do given your location. Well, you could sign up for a virtual information session. You could sign up for a virtual tour. And those are touch points that, you know, after you accumulate so many, is really showing that you're interested. If you're able to visit, bonus, icing on the cake, right? We love that, gold star. But it's not necessary in every single case to visit the campus, although I think a campus visit is incredibly clarifying for students and families and is really great for determining whether or not you are the right fit for those institutions. So I absolutely encourage visits when possible, but understand and know that colleges and universities understand that you can't just visit everywhere and everyone, nor do you want to, because that would be overwhelming. So just kind of side note there. The other piece to this, I think, is that when we're starting to look at how you're developing communications with admissions offices, I think it's important to kind of come in trying to put your best foot forward. You know, we have some general guidelines here. Be polite. My favorite language here is use mature language. So like, I know a lot of times we use things that are more local to us in our areas or in our schools, but you want to try practicing using professional language, making sure you're writing thank you notes. All of that is part of your own professional development. So those are important practices to begin as a student, but also be considerate of your rep's time. If you're going to ask a question, make sure it's a question that you can't find on the website super easily. So if you're like, how many students go to this school? Well, that admissions rep is going to say, well, this person doesn't really know us very well. Why are they asking me this question when it's on the website? So you want to make sure that you're doing a little bit more research and using that time with that rep wisely, because that's what truly makes a difference when it comes to the process. That will be more informative for you and a better use of that representative's time. So those kinds of questions might look something like, I couldn't find a whole lot on this particular group. I'm going to pick on women in engineering. You know, can you tell me a little bit more about what the climate is for women in engineering at your school? And then that could be something where the rep can be prompted to point you to resources and to give you that additional information. So that's a better question than how many students are at your school or how many students are in the engineering program. Okay. I think what's most important is to be curious. You know, I had students when I was an admissions representative ask me all kinds of questions like, you know, in your opinion, what's your favorite memory of what's your favorite campus tradition? Are students talking with faculty regularly? Is that like a real thing on this campus? And so ask your questions. And I think that's going to lead you to good outcomes and to helping you see whether or not this is a good fit for you. Okay. So more mistakes to avoid because we all make them. But if we can avoid them, that would be best. So I think what I commonly see is that students only make interest or show interest to their favorite schools. And I think that can be a mistake. If you have a list of 10 schools, for example, you should be showing each of those schools a little bit of love. because you don't know what the admissions outcome can be. And honestly, if you've developed a nice balanced list of schools, you should really like every single school on your list. There should be no reason why you aren't showing each one of those schools a little bit of love, okay? So the other piece is not attending the official visit. So I mostly see this when I was on the admissions side, I would see students who would randomly say they visited, but there's no way that the admissions office would know that because they never checked in with admissions. Often, these are, not necessarily intentional mistakes. There's no way that students had known that they needed to check in with the office, but because simply they were probably visiting a friend that enrolled last year, or maybe their friend's brother is on that campus and they went to go visit them, and that's how they got a better sense of the school. But we do encourage you to stop by that admissions office and make yourself known on campus. At a minimum, you'll be able to pick up literature. You'll be able to maybe meet your representative, but at least they know that you are there. And if you've missed the campus tour for that day, a lot of times they'll be able to point you to resource either online to say, this is how you take a self-guided tour, or they'll actually have a self-guided map that you can use to take you to the important points on campus. So that is something that's also important. Okay, parents, let your student take the lead here. It really stands out to admissions when it's the parent calling instead of the student. So allow them to kind of take the lead. Of course, there are sometimes special circumstances that a parent would need to take the lead in, but by and large, students should really be owning their process and showing interest on their own. So that is something that I kind of want to remind folks of. And, we want to make sure that you are just being you. I think sometimes students try to put themselves in a box that they think fits on a particular campus, and you really need to put yourself first. You're not trying to make the campus, you shouldn't be trying to put yourself in the box. Own who you are. Be loud and proud, and make sure that it's a place that's going to be great for you.
Hey, Claudia, I have a quick question on that. I have a student, for example, who visited a college recently, and it was on a Saturday and the admissions office wasn't open. In that case, if you've had to visit, but you didn't get to take a tour, would you recommend like reaching out to your admissions rep after if you really liked it and with a question, or just saying how much you enjoyed the campus or whatever?
Yeah, so there's actually two approaches. One is maybe you're going to be in that area and you want to visit, but the office is closed. So you can do a little bit of pre-gaming in honor of the Super Bowl, and you want to be able to send an email or a communication to the admissions office and say, hey, I'm visiting your campus on Saturday. I noted that no one was available and the office was closed. Is it possible that I can meet up with the student? And I've seen admissions offices make that accommodation knowing that you have made the effort to go to their campus. So they will say, we will try our best to connect you with the current student so you can at least have lunch, or you can have a touch point with somebody that can answer some of your questions. On the flip side, sometimes you don't know you're going to be in an area. You're like, oh, hey, this is on the way home. We're just going to stop by, and you roll right into a campus. And you might like it. So I would encourage you to then go to the website for the school, try to find who your admissions representative are, because on the website, they'll either have an admissions general email box, but they also often will show who your specific representative is, and just reach out to them and say, hey, I walked around campus on my own. Here are my additional questions. Or can you provide more context for this? Like, for example, like if you don't know that it's a tradition to paint rocks on campus, because that's popular on some campus, that becomes the messaging board, is they'll paint a rock and they'll put an event on it. And people will stake out rocks on some campuses. But if you didn't know that, you're like, there's all these people staking out rocks on campus and they're painting things on it. Like, what is that? Like, that's a great follow-up question for an admissions professional. Okay. So I always think it's a great thing to do is to lean into that admissions office and use them as a resource. Okay.
So how can parents help? This is a great question. Number one, as Claudia just said, One of the most important things parents can do to help is empower their students to take the lead here. Empower their students to send that email. Yes, you can give them suggestions, you can help them draft, but ultimately empowering students is one of the keys here. Be realistic and focus. So college admissions, like we've talked about, has changed and is changing. And while students, we want them to have tons of options. So focusing on not just reach schools, but possible schools in your visits. A lot of times those are the schools that maybe students don't know about as much, or maybe they haven't explored as much. And so those possible schools visiting those can really introduce and educate a student about an option they might not have known about. And they can leave a possible school feeling really excited about that option, and it might be relatively new to them. If possible, take those virtual visits before you go to an in-person visit, or just take virtual visits of the schools you're not going to be able to get on the campus, right? There's going to be plenty of those. And so finding family time to do those virtual visits is a great opportunity for all of you to get in the same conversation and listen to your students' reactions. When you're in that virtual tour, ask your student questions. What did you think about that? What did you find out what you needed? What other questions do you have? Encouraging them to reflect and be thoughtful, and to be, I always tell my students, be picky, be greedy. What else? And so, and listening to their reactions and giving them the space to share before you share your thoughts is really valuable. Students are just exploring and discovering what they think. And so sometimes they need that space to discover it before they hear your opinion. And definitely having those difficult conversations about financial parameters and any deal breakers, whatever those are, is really important to do in the beginning, so that you can all be on the same page and there isn't a scenario where a student has really connected with a school that just doesn't meet the parameters that the family has set. So absolutely. And then also be excited. I always remind my students and families, like, your student's going to college. Like, this is awesome. And so don't be afraid to be excited about all that you're learning and exploring. When our founder and CEO, Lisa Van Carlton, founded this, she established this parent pledge, which I took myself when my own son was going through this. And I want to say it was incredibly helpful. So I encourage parents and students to encourage parents, before you step foot on that campus, just read over this pledge, stepping back and letting the student take the lead, that the journey is about exploration and discovery. Let the students speak first and share their thoughts, and respect their opinion and be curious about it. Tell me why that's important to you, that there be a really big football culture. Tell me why that matters to you. Oh, well, that's because it's going to be easy for me to make friends because I know I'll have something to talk about. Great. That's good to know, right? And for everyone to give up the expectation that this visit or this college list or this particular college will be perfect, right? Ultimately, the student's going to have a wide range of options and lots of opportunities to thrive. And options are the goal. So it can be really one of the things that's so true about anytime you're taking in a lot of information, complexity, it can get overwhelming. And so sometimes we want to narrow those options, just because having all the possibilities can feel overwhelming. And yet in this process, really leaving those options on the table, even if they're not sure. I visited that campus. I don't know what I think about it. That's okay. That's okay. Take your notes, take your pictures. We'll come back to that decision, right? Keeping those options open and encouraging students to just explore is really something parents can help with. And just a reminder, as we kind of wrap this up, If you have any last questions that you want to drop in the Q&A, please feel free to do so. As a reminder, we will be sending not only the video of today's session, but also the slides and our guide to campus tours as part of the follow-up. And we have lots of other resources available, including a college admissions at highly selective colleges. So those of you that were listening closely when we said the word highly selective, you're going to want to come on back for that. On February 26th at 4 p.m., go on our website and sign up for that. In addition, we have a wonderful resource on our College MatchPoint website called Summer MatchPoint, where you can dive in and students can dive in and really explore all sorts of amazing different options for the upcoming summer, from pre-college programs to online classes to service opportunities. We thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with us today. Please keep the questions coming if you end up with questions after the session. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.